Why, hello, ladies and gentlemen. On today's show, the Padres narrowly defeat the Rockies. Is it time to be concerned about our closer, Mr. Taylor Rogers, and the team? Big news, called up their outfield prospect, Esteury Ruiz. How much of an impact can he make on the major league roster? And maybe a little bit of talking about the All-Star stuff real quick. You know what you guys are listening to. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Wednesday, July 13th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. Follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiiipeno, or at LO_Padres. You might be familiar with some of my baseball related work at Just Baseball, which is a great website. Go check that out. A little bit relevant to today's episode, too. And of course, as always, guys, thank you for making Locked On Padres your first listen. Available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you want to see me wearing my nice, cool, slick, it's not Padres colors, but it's this slick Locked On shirt. So go check out the video if you guys want to do that. Let's get the subscriber numbers up. You know what I'm saying, man? And my crazy hair, my Wolverine style hair, I think is looking pretty good on the YouTube, if I do say so myself. But anyway, on today's episode, guys, we are discussing a couple of very, very important topics. And number one is last night's game. Not going to be a super duper recap. We're going to go over that first, and then we're going to be talking about Taylor Rogers, the closer for the Padres, of course. And Ruiz has been called up to the Major League Ball Club. Going to be talking about that. What does he kind of project as? My feelings on the move, all sorts of things, guys. And then just close with maybe a little all-star stuff. And just a little ha-ha and getting happy about the two members of the Padres that made the All-Star game. So let's get into the game. Ladies and gentlemen. Last night, the Padres narrowly defeated the Colorado Rockies, snapping their 10-game losing streak at Coors Field. Not in general, but at Coors Field, which I had not realized until our man, Don Orsillo, had mentioned that on the broadcast last night. They win this one 6-5 behind an impressively solid start from Mr. Sean Manaea, who goes 6 1/3 innings, 2 earned runs on 5 hits, 1 walk, 5 Ks. He does give up that home run to what's his face? Who the heck was it? Randall Grichuk, which is annoying because Randall Grichuk has been one of the worst outfielders in baseball, and believe it or not, actually, yeah, a little bit worse than our own Trent Grisham, who, man, he makes an airway. Tracking a ball, it looks like he just didn't lead his distance on it correctly, and he didn't dive or anything. It's just he was kind of jogging to the ball, and it ended up being actually farther along than he thought. It gets by him, results in a triple for, if I'm not mistaken, Charlie Blackmon. And then CJ Cron brings him in on a sac fly. So stuff like that matters. But anyway, I don't want to make this the Grisham show. The big story of the night, aside from it just being really sad, our boy, Sean Manaea, finally had like just a solid start. If he can give more outings like this, right? 6 innings, 2 earned runs, a couple strikeouts or whatever, that's more than great and more than good enough for this Padres rotation that certainly has a lot of depth. Also, our boy Manny Machado had a home run in this game, an absolute smoke daddy-o, by the way, 434 feet. That was rad. And CJ Abrams had a home run. He really needed that. Not just because he's been playing poorly for his very, very, very short stint on the major league team. Don't get me wrong. This hasn't been an indictment of CJ Abrams as a player, but it has been a little bit like, oh man, this has been rough for him. And on top of that, the collision with Jurickson Profar, obviously the very scary injury from last week. I imagine he doesn't feel very good about that whole thing, seeing as his knee is what went into Jurickson Profar's face. So happy for him in that. He also made a really nice defensive play at short, snagging a ball that should have been a single probably. So that was really cool for him. But the big thing about this game, guys, is Taylor Rogers, who barely gets the save after allowing 2 earned runs in the bottom of the 9th inning. I was very scared because of just the factor that The Padres have been very bad for some reason for a while now against the Rockies. They seem to be our arch nemesis. In fairness, I actually think that this year's team is pretty okay. I don't think it's that much of a joke as compared to years prior, and certainly maybe not even last year's team. They got Chris Bryant, Connor Joe has been a really solid player for them. CJ Crone is legit. They like have stuff. They have stuff that don't make them a joke. This isn't Pittsburgh or Cincy or even the Chicago Cubs or the Royals or the Tigers, teams like that. They're like the tier right above it. But even still, I was expecting a loss here. I'm not gonna lie. I was just absolutely expecting. He thankfully is able to get out of it. But Rogers, it just feels like his slider has not been effective lately. It feels like batters aren't chasing his pitches. It's almost gives me a slight Blake Snell vibe, where it's not necessarily that all the time that people are rocketing home runs against Taylor Rogers or anything like that, or that he's consistently just like giving up hard contact overall. He's not the best at it. It's just that he can't really get guys. He's not fooling anybody lately, and he's been bad for long enough time that we have to talk about it. His ERA is sitting above 4 now, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so 4.04 ERA, which is a far cry from the like less than 1 ERA that he had for a lot to begin the season. Now, don't get me wrong, he was due for regression. This is not a guy throughout any of his career who's really put up like giant numbers like that, right? He's never been a Mariano Rivera or anything like that, right? Even in 2021 at 3.35 ERA, he was solid. But years before that, an effective reliever, I wouldn't say a truly dominant shutdown reliever. He has been an improvement for the Padres, but it's concerning. It's definitely concerning. Yes, he was due for regression, but at this point, I do have some worries. However, here's the thing. I'm not so sure that there's an easy fix for this that makes sense for the current state of the Padres. And what I mean by that is some people are going to say David Robertson, right? He's on the Cubs. I just mentioned how bad they are. He's definitely getting moved, right? You have, heck, maybe what's his face? What's that guy's name? I forgot his name on the Royals. Might be an option. Sir Anthony Dominguez, if the Phillies fall out of it, right? There's plenty of relievers out there that a lot of teams have that they may be looking to move, right? But my thing is to acquire those guys, Lou Trevino, maybe if some people like him, to acquire those guys would take assets. And I'm not so sure that they're that much better than Taylor Rogers, or at least not certifiably better. I think David Robertson is good, but also David Robertson's having a resurgent season. And with just the state of the Padres right now, I don't know if we want to buy in on people who are having a good first half, because that hasn't typically worked out for the team over the last few years. You know what I'm saying? It just has not been the calling card of the San Diego Padres. Just buying high on people who are performing well, and then they just kind of predictably regress. So I wouldn't want to do that. And that's probably the biggest reliever off the top of my head that's out there. There's certainly some others. But I would rather get guys that are a little bit lower tier than Rogers just to bolster the bullpen. And hopefully, if the bullpen can get healthier, I'm not all that into saying we need to get a new closer. I'm just not. I'm not. Now we have to see what happens, because if Rodgers does keep up with this pace, which I don't think he will, I think he's going to get better. If he does keep up with this pace, then we're going to have to see if heck Nabil Krismat has to be the closer, right? He's been more of a long inning guy, or if I mean Denelson Lamet just got set back down, but you get what I'm saying, right? The Padres are in a really dicey spot, and I don't think that there are many relievers out there that I trust are 100% better, right? Yeah, you can go get Joe Mantiply, but he's on the Diamondbacks. You can go get Josh Hader, but that team's good and also going to take too much. And then you could get Ryan Helsley, but that team is also good and it will take way too much, right? So I don't see an acquisition for a new closer that is certifiably better than Taylor Rogers that I think could help this team right now. For a team that, by the way, needs to spend those assets, in my opinion, elsewhere, because, like I said, hopefully, you have to hope these, and I'm willing to hope on this if you're the Padres in their current state, that they have a lot of guys on the IL with Pomeranz, with Morejon, with Pierce Johnson, with plenty of guys, right? So hopefully they get back and can make the bullpen a little bit better, or trade for some lower tier guys. That's just my take, which is always the correct take, obviously. You guys know that. You've been listening to the podcast for a while, hopefully. But if it's not, guys, if it's not your first time, all right, you may be new to the old Blue Nile, ladies and gentlemen. What is Blue Nile? What is it? What is it? Is the best place to go for all of your kind of jewelry needs. You can celebrate all of life's special moments thanks to BlueNile.com. You can get the engagement ring of their dreams, classic timeless jewelry pieces. They've got wedding jewelry, like engagement rings and bands and stuff like that. I'm not interested in jewelry whatsoever. Look at me. Do I look like I'm that the ladies are a big fan of me? No. No. Do I look like it? No, not whatsoever. But Blue Nile still can help you out. All right. Because even if it isn't, say a wedding or anything like that, or for someone that's your partner or anything like that, it could just be as a gift. So they've got you in there. And they've also got fine jewelry, diamond jewelry, cocktail rings, gemstone necklaces, just really cool stuff for people that you care about. It doesn't even have to be a romantic thing. Maybe it could be for I don't know, Father's Day somehow. I don't really know. But you guys get my point. They have everything that you could need at BlueNile.com. And because you're listening to this podcast, I got a deal for you. Let me tell you, guys. You ready? Locked On listeners, you can get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. It's a podcast exclusive. In order to acquire this podcast exclusive, use the code LOCKED ON, guys. That's code LOCKED ON, easy to remember. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. Of course, guys, got to mention again, thank you for making Locked On Padres your first listen, free and available on all platforms. Let's talk about the other news, all right? Because we talked enough about Taylor Rogers. That was a little bit of a confusing string of thoughts, I must say. I'm rambling a little bit, maybe it felt like. But bottom line is that I really do stand by what I said. But let's talk about a new development for the Padres. And that is that Esteury Ruiz, one of their prospects and one of the biggest breakouts in the minor leagues this year, has been called up to the team. As of the recording right now, he hasn't been placed in the lineup or anything. I imagine he's going to get a shot, so we'll have to see what happens. But I'm very excited for the upside of Esteury Ruiz. Let's talk about his numbers really quickly. Before this year, he'd kind of been an okay batter in the minors, but he wasn't a guy that, because there wasn't too much power, that there wasn't necessarily a long success at the higher levels of the minor leagues, that, in rookie ball, yeah, he was hitting like 300, but he hadn't really done that necessarily in a more certifiable way that people and prospect analysts liked at the higher levels, right? I mean, just even last year, this is a guy who hit 249 with a 328 on base, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but that's like in the minors. So that's not necessarily something that's going to make people turn their heads. And most prospect lists, Baseball America, where I am a contributor to, justbaseball.com, which I just wrote some of my thoughts, by the way. You can check that out in the podcast description, talking about Esteury Ruiz and the rest of the Padres. If you're more of a reader type, you can go check that out, guys. That barely anybody had him in most top 100 lists, or even the top 10 lists for the Padres specifically heading into this season. And what has he done this year? He slashed hold on, let me make sure I get this right. 333 with a 467 on base, 560 slugging, and an OPS over 1,000. That's pretty dynamite, ladies and gentlemen. And that's not at rookie ball. That's not at single A. That's at double A and triple. Numbers did not fall off or anything all dramatically once he made it to triple A. Just slightly lower average, 315 average, right? Like, he's been just absolutely killing it. And the big thing about him is, while he isn't necessarily a huge power guy, he has 13 home runs this year, but he's not a huge power guy. That's not necessarily something that I think a lot of people are expecting to translate, in a major, major way, especially to start in the majors. But the big thing about this guy is he's a stolen base fiend. He's got 60 stolen bases this year, which is absolutely across 77 games for you to have 60 stolen bases. This is something you don't see much anymore in Major League Baseball or baseball anywhere, right? You don't see these ultimate speedsters. He was on pace for stealing over 100 bases this year, and that hadn't been done since Billy Hamilton in 2012 when he came to minor league baseball. So this is genuinely a one-of-a-kind sort of speedster. Is this Padres team a team that necessarily needs stolen bases and speed? Not always. They've got some decent base runners, not the best in the world, but that could still help. And yes, they aren't a team that is always dying for batting average and on base, at least in terms of the past few years, right? They've actually been a lot better on base percentage, but even this year, in fairness, batting average could help. And the biggest reason for that is not like your Ha-Seong Kims and not your Jake Cronenworths who's having a down year and whatnot. It's that the Padres outfield has been one of the worst for contending teams in baseball, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen. It hasn't been good. And I'm not breaking news there. When it struggles of Trent Grisham, who only Randall Grichuk and a couple other players have been worse offensively than him. In terms of overall WAR, he's got about the 14th to 15th, which isn't great, and that's only bolstered that he's been a pretty okay defender in the outfield. And I'm say okay, as evidenced last by, by the against the Grisham has been a big reason for this. Will has come up and actually pretty solid. The bottom line is that not a great outfield, and with the injury to Jurickson Profar, that makes even more scary. Now, don't get me wrong. We've been talking all season on this podcast. If you're listening to, or maybe listening to the first time, that the Padres need and acquire some outfield bats. But Esteury, he can be that lottery ticket, sort of guy that can help the Padres out. This year, the outfield guys, check this out. They have the third fewest home runs as a team in terms of their outfield production in baseball, only 19. They rank 28th in OPS. Their mark is 649. And they're in a four-way tie for the third worst WRC plus in all of baseball, with only the A's and Reds faring worse. That's right. Only the A's and Reds in WRC plus, which is a metric that judges kind of building in the ballpark and sort of stuff, your overall hitting as an offensive player. They've been pretty bad, ladies and gentlemen. They've been pretty bad. And I'm not necessarily saying that we needed the Padres outfield, or that we expected the Padres outfield to be good, but we certainly were expecting more from Trent Grisham, who at this rate, it would not shock me if the Padres are trying to move, if they moved him in some sort of deal in a package deal for another player. Maybe they go get Ramon Laureano out somewhere, right? Like maybe they get, everyone's talking about Andrew Benintendi, right? Like there's so many options out there. If they move him around and even just get a replacement level player, a Seth Brown, right, out of Oakland, might even be a guy that the Padres might be looking at this point. That's how bad Trent Grisham has been. That is why he's my number one biggest disappointment for the Padres. Honestly, ever since the second half of last season, he's been pretty bad. In terms of WOBA, like I mentioned, since the second half of 2021, he's the fourth lowest among qualified outfielders. So he hasn't been very good. And now I'm going to sneeze. See, just talking about Grisham made me sneeze. That's how bad it's been, ladies and gentlemen. It makes me sick. So Esteury Ruiz, the biggest thing, I'm not going to pretend I know everything about his mechanics as a prospect. You have to go read all of your prospect lists. Go check out Just Baseball. Go check out Locked On MLB Prospects, where I imagine Lindsey Crosby is going to be talking about him. But the biggest thing is, for the Padres, there's no place to really go than up. Right? That's the biggest thing with Esteury Ruiz, where unlike the CJ Abrams call-up, which I didn't hate, I was excited. I mean, he's the top overall prospect. You got to be excited for a guy who's getting Trey Turner comparisons. But I wasn't necessarily saying they need to do that, and it makes sense, because I was a big believer in Ha-Seong Kim being a guy who could hold down the fort for a few months until Tatis came back because of his defense, and he's gotten a little better as a bat this year. So I was proven right on that front. But with this, I don't see anybody here. Yes, Nomar Mazara has been okay, but I don't see any upside in the Padres outfield, especially with Profar out right now, right? And he'd been the only saving grace for the Padres outfield. I imagine they'd be worse potentially than the Reds and the A's in terms of outfield production, and worse in a lot of other categories, if not for Jurickson Profar having a really big, nice breakout season. Unfortunately, he got hurt, obviously. Thoughts are with my guy. Hopefully he gets better. That was really scary. But yeah, just as a team, they could even, and heck, they could even use the batting average and the on base. They're 18th in batting average, 15th in on base. Not the worst in the world, don't get me wrong, but sure, give me a boost there. They need power, and this guy isn't necessarily going to give that, but we just need players that can get on base on this point, because it's getting ridiculous. And the Padres just need aid. They need guys who can get on base, and the speed potential of this guy, Esteury Ruiz, if it translates to the majors, we might see a genuinely phenomenal type player. Remember when the Padres were chasing after Whit Merrifield. What if he can kind of give them what they thought that they wanted from Whit Merrifield, who is a little bit washed right now over in Kansas City because they stupidly didn't trade him when they had the chance. But what if he can be that? What if he can be okay in the outfield? Can't be much worse than what we have right now. And if he does perform well, then a lot of the burden on the Padres to go out and get a big outfielder is lessened a bit. And there's just not as much pressure in that area. Or heck, if he performs super well, then you're like, okay, cool. Maybe we can trade some other little outfield prospects because we know we have this guy, right? I'm not saying trade Robert Hassel, who's the team's probably number one yet to be called up prospect, but nonetheless, Ruiz very exciting. And heck, you know what else? Stolen bases rule. You know, stolen bases are just fun. How about that? That's my take. Put that on your aggregating list. You can soundboard that and whatnot. You can clip it. Esteury Ruiz, super excited. The guy steals bases and it's fun. So we'll see how he translates. We'll see if he gets put in the starting lineup soon. And again, as of right now, I have not seen any announcement. Let me just check really quickly if there's been any announcement of the lineup. Yeah, nothing so far. But yeah, those are my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to read the article, of course, remember, go check that out at Just Baseball. But I have something else I want you guys to go check out. It has to do with betting, ladies and gentlemen. It's the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. BetOnline.net. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. Obviously, the NHL playoffs ended, so my apologies for that. I went a little bit on robo mode and was just reading and whatnot, guys. But with the NFL, season coming up, they've got your odds on that, MVP odds, all sorts of stuff they got there, and of course, baseball every day, right? That's what baseball works. It's the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. So go check it out. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. And we keep it moving, ladies and gentlemen. And let's continue this podcast by closing out on site. So while we did talk a little bit at the beginning about Rodgers and he hasn't been great, we did get a little bit dark there talking about the Padres outfield situation and how we're hoping that Esteury Ruiz can save it. But let's just talk about something good, man. Let's have some good vibes. Maybe you're driving in your car right now, back home from work or to work, because this is coming out on Wednesday morning, to work, and you're saying, oh my gosh, I need something to brighten my mood. I'm almost there. Let's just talk about Joe Musgrove and Manny Machado. Okay, guys, obviously the Major League Baseball organization, I don't know why I framed it like that, they announced the all-star starters and reserve. They announced that Manny Machado was an all-star not too long ago. It was scary for a minute there, by the way. It was scary that he wasn't going to be the starter and that Nolan Arenado was going to get the nod, who, by the way, great player and has hit for a lot of power and has been very good. But Machado deserves the nod for just simple factor of being, leading in WAR and just being a much more pivotal point for this Padres team. Like, I genuinely do not know where they would be at without him, offensively, especially for this season. He was announced to be a starter, as well as Wilson Contreras of the Cubs playing catcher, Paul Goldschmidt playing Cardinals first base, and then what's his face? My boy, the lit man, Jazz Chisholm of the Marlins starting, Trey Turner, the shortstop for the National League starting, outfield Ronald Acuna Jr., Mookie Betts, and Jock Peterson, which was a little bit surprising. Talked to Ben Kaspic on yesterday's episode, host of the Locked On Giants podcast, about how he's kind of a platoon guy who doesn't help you as much in the outfield. So I was a little bit surprised by that addition. But then again, can't think of someone who is just super, super more deserving. And Bryce Harper will be playing, at least was voted, I should say, for the National League. And granted, he's not going to be playing the game because of the injury. Instead, that's going to be somebody else. My boy George Springer was actually a starter. I actually predicted, and that was who I picked to make the All-Star team. I also predicted Julio Rodriguez before it was cool. There's Jose Trevino of the Yankees, Jose Ramirez, who allegedly the Padres were interested in getting. He's starting for the American League. And then for reserves, Jeff McNeil, Nolan Arenado, where he belongs as a reserve, CJ Cron, who murdered the Padres the last time he played them, by the way. Kyle Schwarber, Juan Soto, Starling Marte, Ian Happ, William Contreras, which is cool. The Contreras brothers are going to be playing. Garrett Cooper, an injury replacement for Bryce Harper. And then the legacy pick, Albert Pujols. I did talk a little bit with Ben about this, the legacy thing. I don't necessarily love it. I'm going to be a little bit of a hater for a second, but like he's kind of like this is too old, man. Like at least Miguel Cabrera has actually been like literally the Tigers' best offensive player. Like at least he's been good in the classic batting average kind of way. Heck, I would take him on the Padres right now. Make no mistake. Although that contract for Miggy isn't great either. But even still, I mean, I think I take it. You know what I'm saying? Like I think I might take it. But like at least he's done something. Pujols is a platoon guy, right? That plays against only lefties, not even the strong side of the platoon, right? And that's my problem, right? But Pujols has actually made teams worse. If you just look at WAR over the past like few seasons, right? He's been one of the worst players in baseball. So my thing is, yeah, he's great, but and don't get me wrong, I'm a guy that will defend the Derek Jeter farewell tour, and I'll defend a lot of other guys. But my thing is, I'm not feeling it here. I love Pujols that much, like especially the younger generation. I don't know. But also, it doesn't count. It doesn't matter really. It's a legacy selection. The home run derby is a little bit weird that he's going to be in there. I don't think that's going to go. That's a to quote Luke Skywalker in the superior Last Jedi film, this is not going to go the way you think when it comes to Albert Pujols in the home run derby. But of course, just to keep it moving, the starter for the National League at starting pitching is going to be Mr. Sandy Alcantara, which before Padres fans get mad, more than deserving, more than deserving. He's the front runner for the Cy Young Award as of right now. He's been tremendous and he deserves it. He deserves it over Joe Musgrove. Joe Musgrove has been amazing, make no mistake, but he's still probably, in the top 5 race for the Cy Young voting. But I think that Sandy Alcantara, because of the fact that he's been just an innings eater and that he's had all these complete games and he's been having that DeGrom treatment because the Mets don't always support him with runs. Like that's kind of I get it, right? So don't be mad about Sandy Alcantara being the starter. I doubt many listeners and many Padres fans are, even if of course, I mean, Joe Musgrove's our guy, right? He's our guy, but he's going to pitch in this game, which should be awesome. And I don't really think that there were any other Padres that needed to be in the All-Star game, right? You could have said at one point that Taylor Rogers was going to be in there. Obviously, he is not and shouldn't be. And maybe you could have maybe at least at one point when I last did this, when I talked early about the All-Star voting and what my All-Star ballot was, how I voted for Ty France and Julio Rodriguez, for example, the AL, and that Jurickson Profar, if you were going to vote him, there was at least a chance back then. Like he'd been a pretty good player for the Padres. Not necessarily like super like he needs to be in there. But if you were going to be a little bit of a homer, he kind of, you could do worse than Jurickson Profar, right? And if he had played a little bit better, if his slugging didn't go down, and obviously the injury, then it's not a far cry that he was off. So that's something that the Padres should just take solace in, is that they were at least close, or Profar was close to that. That's how effective he's been. Mackenzie Gore at one point might have been the All-Star guy, but unfortunately those starts against the Rockies kind of nuked his All-Star bid. And then this latest start against the Giants definitely nuked his Rookie of the Year bid, unless he gets drastically better down the road, which we'll have to see. I mean, he is a rookie after all. He's going to run into speed bumps. But yeah, that's basically it for Padres, guys. Don't get me wrong. Still love Jake Cronenworth. Still love Fernando Tatis Jr. Still love him. I got love for him. But as of right now, those are the 2 All-Stars for the team. And I think we're kind of clear. Like there's no guy that the Padres that got snubbed, right? I could come out here and fake outrage and say Jake Cronenworth should be there, or Ha-Seong Kim, or I don't know who else is the Padres, or Yu Darvish, right? And Yu Darvish has been good, and he's also lit, right? I vote for Yu Darvish just because he's fun to watch pitch, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to fake outrage and feign it and say, yeah, this guy deserved it. What is MLB doing? I think for the most part, all-star snubs happen. And it's actually what makes it so fun, is that we get to brag or yell about this stuff, brag about our own all-stars, and then yell and complain about, oh, this guy should have been in. Bottom line is there's limited spots, and that's what makes it cool. I don't like participation trophy things. I don't want this to become like the NBA, where their Hall of Fame is like, yeah, hey, that guy Gerald Wallace or Ben Wallace? Could he literally play offense at all? No. But did he have a dominant best defensive player of the year and maybe decade for like 3 to 4 seasons? Yeah, Hall of Fame. It's like, I think it should actually be pretty hard to be called an all-star or the best of the best or Hall of Famer, right? I don't think, and it's not an indictment if you're not, right? There are plenty of good players, right? There's plenty of good players out there. I just mentioned Ramon Laureano. I mean, Mark Canha is a good player for the Mets, right? Not an all-star, not an indictment. You need guys like that, and that's fine. That's fine. But ladies and gentlemen, with that all being said, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Look forward to the rest of the week as we recap games, potentially do some crossovers, talk more about all-star stuff, talk about how Esteury Ruiz looks as he steals 7 bags in his opening debut. Obviously, calling it right now, 7 stolen bases has never been done before. Or at least maybe it hasn't. I don't know. Someone Google that. Curious what the most steals in a single game has been, or like something like that. Maybe over a couple games. I don't know. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, gonna have that for the rest of the week. Go check out that article at Just Baseball. Follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or at LO_Padres. Subscribe to the YouTube. And until next time, stay safe and of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies, take care.